I think at every level, we all identify. That's why I say we are largely quite tribal. I think that's human nature. We relate to... So the feeling that we have today, for example, right? Singaporeans feeling very angsty and perhaps for some very aggressive or unhappy with foreigners. It's a sign of nationalism, which in a way, compared to the past, we've always talked about Singapore being an immigrant society, which it has always been and it continues to be so. But the difference is, in the past, we didn't have perhaps quite as strong a national identity. And in fact, it's maybe a good thing that we have this reaction. It shows that Singaporeans identify with a Singaporean tribe. I don't care, Malay, Chinese, Indian, we're all Singaporeans. I don't like the foreigners being here. No, they can't. Whatever it is, in a sense, it reflects, if you want to look at the silver lining, and I think it reflects a growing sense of being Singaporean. And I'm someone who feels very strongly that this sense of identity is important to nurture. So the question is, what is this Singaporean identity? What kind of values we should hold? And not just amongst ourselves, but also with regards to foreigners. How many of you, and this is a thing that we always ask, right? How many of you here are who are not born in Singapore? Be just a show of hands. And how many are Singaporeans today? Those who are not born but now are Singaporeans? Does it make you... So growing up might be slightly different. You come from different places. So how many of you have parents who are not born in Singapore? How many of you have grandparents who are not born in Singapore? They were immigrants, right? And in the past, they didn't come here to... Like, suddenly our grandparents' generation, great-grandparents' generation, I don't think many of them came here to say that they want to settle down here. They came here to make money, remit money back, and then finally go back. Sometimes by force or circumstance or whatever reason, they decided to stay. So that is our history. That is our makeup. Because as a small country with a limited population, that's the nature of things. Of course, I said the difference is, during that time, there's no Singaporean identity. You don't feel that I'm Singaporean or whatever. I just have here, I work, get along with whoever I need to get along with. And of course, under the British days, they will demarcate. All people, Chinese go to Chinatown or whatever clusters. Malay in Geylang Serai area. The Indians will be in Little India, and so on and so forth. And that's the way it functions. And everybody's all quite happy. But as we begin to evolve, we form a national identity, and which is a good thing. But would immigration remain something that's part of our backdrop? Should we say that we should stop immigration altogether? That's something that is at hand today. Why does immigration continue? Because one, apart from the demographics, where we are, in terms of as a declining population, it's not unique to Singapore. Many countries are facing it, developed countries. It is not typical to Singapore. If we decide to be very proud to be Singaporeans, I'm not interested in any foreigners coming here anymore. Let's close the door. You can come here and work. We manage the numbers, but let's just look after Singaporeans. I'm not sure whether is that what Singaporeans feel should be done. Because what it means is that as we all grow older, by 2030, where 1/3 of the population is 65 and above, you have fewer and fewer younger Singaporeans. I mean, that's a reality. But you also have, as a small country, do you have a flow of people coming in who decide? Like some of you here who are not born in Singapore, does it make you less proud to be a Singaporean now that you're here? Or does it make your parents less proud? I think all of us become Singaporeans over time. And that process continues. So this issue of nationalism, of foreigners, it's important. I think, as Siong Seng mentioned, I think we went through a period. It's always been part of our Singapore makeup. But we crossed a tipping point somewhere in the last few years. The tipping point was reached because I think there was a surge. The numbers were more than we could digest. Infrastructural strains. And suddenly, your people previously, maybe in F&B line, you didn't have people from other races serving you, now you have. But as pointed out also, I think, who pointed it out? Was it Rohim, is it? Or Muhammad Ali? A lot of these jobs are also, not many Singaporeans also want to do. So they also play that job. They also carry out that jobs. They don't have some of them may not have the same language competencies. And some of us resent it. But we should also ask ourselves, should that be the reaction we have towards people. It's no fault of their own. It's their upbringing, their education level. Difficult, unless we say that everyone who comes here to work here must be competent in English. I think they will level up. They may be able to understand a little bit, but we know how it is like, right? Some of us have been overseas. You go to France, you can't speak French. Whatever, it's just like that. I don't know what to do. They don't like it. And some countries, right? Every country I've been to for training, I've been subjected to racist and nationalistic reactions. Maybe the problem was me, I don't know. But but you experience it and you know what it's like. Is that what we want to be known as Singaporeans? We want to be proud to be Singaporeans? Good. I think that's a good thing to see. But we as Singaporeans need to ask ourselves, what values do we hold? How do we treat others? How do we treat foreigners in our midst? I think we need to ask ourselves those questions. Because that's something that you can do. All of us as individuals, as a cluster, as a family, all of you who are parents, how do you influence your kids? The way you treat your foreign domestic worker. The way you talk about, you go to the hawker center, maybe you don't like the fact that how you comment in front of your children. All this is about growing our national identity, which involves value systems that we should hold dear. Should we be proud to be Singaporeans, but treating people dismissively? You see, some of us don't like the fact that some people come here, they are PRs or they work here, and it's a stepping stone and they go abroad. And we don't like that fact. But you flip it the other way around. What if we feel that actually people who come here, even though they may be a stepping stone, they move on, some will stay. But because they feel the warmth of the Singaporeans, the friendship, the way they are being treated, some will decide to stay, and like some of you here who were not born in Singapore, sunk your roots. And your children can go do the national service and do whatever they need to do. And they're proud to be Singaporeans. It's a new generation of Singaporeans that grew. We are a function of those immigrants who came before, who decided for one reason or another to sink their roots. And some of this, the impact that we have on some of them, and they will be the new Singaporeans. Those who actually choose to move on will remain a friend of Singapore because they always remember the time when I studied in Singapore or when I worked in Singapore and the friends I had. And they will always look out for us. Because you have all these little small red dots or pink dots or whatever shades of red because of the impact that we had on them. And they leave here, going somewhere else, remembering Singapore and remembering Singaporeans in a particular way. What memories do you want them to take away with them? How many of you here have lived and worked overseas? How many of you feel really like a second-class citizen and treated quite poorly abroad? I don't know. Some of you might, we have all different experiences. But you remember how it feels? The way it shapes the way you look at that country and the people is exactly the same things that others feel as well. Yes, we may not like for whatever reasons, but does it mean that that gives us the reason to be unpleasant? Does it give us reason to be hostile? That's something every individual needs to decide. So it is an issue that we need to grapple with. We do need to manage the numbers. So we are managing that. We went through a period where I think in the mid-2000s, we were struggling to try to identify where the future economic growth was going to come from because the competition from the region, China and India and all that was quite acute. The economy wasn't doing fantastically in the first half of the 2000s. 2001, there was a recession. 2003-04, the SARS recession. And actually, we were hit quite badly. If you look at the income growth and all that, it was actually flat to negative during the first half of the 2000s. That's also the period where the decision on IR and all that was taken. So I think we were quite concerned about the future. So opportunities arose. I think we took in the influx of foreign labor, talent, and so on, allowed the economy to grow and thrive. And companies, many of you here, you work in companies that have been doing well, and despite the levies and all that, you are still demanding. And the economy grew. And on the back of that, I believe that we were able to recover actually quite quickly from the 2008 crisis. But there was a cost to it. There's a social cost. And we feel it. And we sense it around us. So we have been trying to moderate the growth, I think since probably the 2008, 2009 started. I think if we didn't take those steps, the growth would have been much larger. So we are ratcheting it up. Immigration as well, we are also tightening. But the fact of the matter is, while we managed that, and I think we recognize that that was one of the disamenities that happened, we will ramp up in terms of infrastructure requirements and so on. And from an urban development point of view, we're also looking at spreading out the population across the country. So, for example, government agencies will be moving. So MOM eventually will move to Paya Lebar, and MND will move to Jurong, and so on. And that will also spread, and that will help. And easing the physical strain, we feel, will help. But notwithstanding that, having foreigners in our midst is part of our landscape. And it is something, whether will it, I don't know. I mean, Thomas mentioned that you see that riots will happen. Well, maybe it's a good thing that we should bear that in mind. What does it mean? Does it mean that Singaporeans will end up bashing up some foreigners? Well, there's this case, right? Some bunch of Kiwis and Australians, they beat up the Singaporeans and some in Jambil and all that. But you can see how these things can spark off in whatever shape and form. So it's an area we need to watch, not trivial. A lot of the things online today is really not the race-religion part, but a lot of it is in terms of nationality. So we need to see how best to assimilate or to help in terms of the employers to make sure that the foreigners who are working here, as far as I'm concerned, you come here, you embrace Singapore, you embrace Singaporeans. Singaporeans in their own right, and it's two ways. So we need to also look at CP, which doesn't preclude this group, this particular team, but we need to work on that as well.